For the longest time, corporate travel felt like the very definition of a necessary evil. It was this massive cost center managed through complicated, often really outdated expense forms and governed by these rigid, almost punitive rules. It was just a friction point for travelers and, well, a data nightmare for finance. But the world hit pause, didn't it?
It absolutely did. And that pause, combined with the explosive growth of AI and just a seismic shift in corporate priorities, driven by ESG mandates, it has fundamentally changed the game. Business travel is roaring back, but it's not the disorganized, compliance-driven mess it used to be. The transition we're tracking is profound. Corporate mobility has officially moved from a cost to be minimized to a strategic investment to be maximized.
That shift in framing is everything, and the sheer scale of the return, it just underscores why this is so critical right now. We're not talking about a slow creep back to 2019 levels.
No, no. What's fascinating here is the sheer velocity and magnitude. Global business travel spending is expected to exceed $1.7 trillion by the end of this year, 2024. And when you look ahead, projections suggest we will hit a new historical high of, $1.57 trillion globally in 2025? That's a robust 6.6% year-over-year growth.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, this is the largest expenditure category that many executives oversee, second only to payroll.
That is a staggering commitment.
Yeah.
It's difficult to wrap your head around those figures, especially considering the existential threats that, Zoom and Microsoft Teams posed to the road warrior just a couple of years ago.
Right.
We thought every meeting that wasn't strictly necessary would just be handled virtually forever.
Yet here we are. And this creates the core tension we need to analyze today. And it's what's defining this new era. It's the undeniable visceral resurgence of the need for in-person interaction, balanced against these escalating, sometimes conflicting demands for strict cost control, genuine traveler wellness, and perhaps most critically, environmental responsibility, all driven by those mandatory ESG mandates.
Absolutely. So our mission for you, the listener, today is to synthesize exactly how modern corporate strategy, from the CFO's desk all the way to the travel manager's playbook, is being rewritten by this necessity: balancing human connection, clear financial ROI, stringent sustainability mandates, and disruptive technology, especially, as you said, agentic AI. We're moving beyond just bookings and expenses and into organizational strategy. Let's start with that return on investment imperative, because that strategic payoff is the foundation for justifying this multi-trillion-dollar expenditure. So why are executives and budget owners choosing to put people back on planes, trains, and in hotels when digital communication is so technically sophisticated and, frankly, so cheap?
It really boils down to the enduring power of face-to-face connection, which virtual tools simply cannot replicate for those high-stakes interactions. And the data isn't soft. It's overwhelmingly quantitative. Researchers have found that face-to-face communication is up to 34 times more powerful than online communication.
34 times?
Yeah. And that magnitude isn't just about, clearer information exchange. It's about the generation of trust, empathy, and all that nonverbal understanding.
34 times more powerful. That's not a marginal gain. That's a competitive advantage. I mean, we often overlook the intangible elements: the ability to read the room, the spontaneous conversations in the hallway, the shared meal that builds rapport. Those moments simply don't happen in a scheduled 30-minute video call.
Precisely. And there was a Forbes study. A powerful 95% of respondents confirmed that in-person meetings are absolutely essential for building and maintaining the long-term, high-value business relationships that drive revenue. If you look at the life cycle of a major client relationship, virtual tools are, they're excellent for maintenance and status updates, but travel is required for the foundation.
The foundation.
The initial handshake, the deep dive into complex problems, and, the resolution of high-stakes disputes.
And you can track that direct financial payoff, which is what budget holders really care about. We're looking specifically at retention rates. It's well documented that an increase of just 5% in customer retention can lead to anywhere from 25% to 95% higher profits. So that face-to-face investment isn't a perk. It's a structural necessity for cementing business relationships that last.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the incentive for governments and national economies to encourage travel is just massive. One study found that UK firms alone could unlock over £319 billion in sales by increasing strategic travel investment. But the most compelling, globally resonant statistic is the undeniable ROI right here in the U.S.
Okay, yeah, the U.S. data point is a game changer for how travel is accounted for.
It is. U.S. business travel spending represents a phenomenal 14.6x return on investment. Let me just repeat that.
Please do.
For every $1 spent on business travel, it translates to $14.60 in net operating margin return to the company.
$14.60 back for every dollar out. I mean, that instantly, conversationally, moves travel out of the cost center column and firmly into the crucial investment column. If I told a CFO I had an investment vehicle that guaranteed a 14.6x return, they wouldn't just approve the budget, they'd ask why we weren't spending more.
That is the core argument driving this resurgence. But, and this is the crucial, shift travel is no longer the default. That's the strategic part. The travel we see today is shorter, it's more selective, and it's laser-focused on clear objectives. Companies are actively developing what we call the why we fly matrix.
Why we fly.
Yeah. Systematically prioritizing trips based on that clear, quantifiable ROI.
So it's not about taking a trip just because tradition demands it. It's about ensuring that every single journey achieves a measurable, high-stakes goal, whether that's securing a new multi-year account or perhaps fast-tracking a complex internal project that's been bottlenecked.
Exactly. And CFOs are now clearly defining these top drivers for investing in travel. Unsurprisingly, sales and business development lead the charge at 68%.
Makes sense.
You need to see the client, shake the hand, close the deal. Next, we see internal business planning and strategy at a solid 50%, followed very closely by client account management at 48%. Employee training is right behind that. The key here is complexity and collaboration.
I read this one anecdote in the source material about a complex integration project. The team had been meeting virtually for months with, no real traction. They finally decided to travel, met in person for 4 days, and achieved resolutions and consensus that would have taken months to resolve virtually. That time saving, the opportunity cost recovered, that's an invaluable, often overlooked part of the ROI calculation.
That is the perfect example of purposeful travel. And this is where we need to break down the different use cases for travel, using a framework that categorizes trips based on their importance and the ability of technology to replace them.
Okay, so tell us about the two main buckets, the Thrive use cases and the Battleground use cases.
So the Thrive use cases. These are trips characterized by high importance and low technology replaceability. These are the mission-critical, relationship-focused journeys that just demand physical presence. They will lead the travel comeback and have the most long-term need, because they are fundamentally about trust, nonverbal cues, and human connection.
So we're talking about initial client visits, high-stakes sales pitches, complex cross-border contract negotiations, and that relationship-heavy project work where you need to build rapport quickly. Those activities are almost impossible to replace virtually without a significant loss of effectiveness.
That's the strategic core of the comeback. And then you have the battleground use cases. These are high importance, but also high technology replaceability. This category is dominated by, say, small group internal meetings, leadership offsites, and certain types of hands-on internal training. During the pandemic, companies realized virtual platforms could actually serve many of these information exchange needs quite well.
I see. So these battleground trips are high stakes because they involve strategic planning, but they are becoming less frequent. So the focus shifts from pure necessity to enhanced experience. If a company does decide to bring a small internal team together, the stakes for that less frequent gathering are now higher. They need the environment to be extremely productive, comfortable, and conducive to deep collaboration.
Precisely. They are investing heavily in the outcome. And the data confirms this purposeful, segmented shift. When you look at the highest frequency travelers, the traditional road warriors, their trips are driven primarily by sales and client projects. We see 21% to 23% traveling monthly or more for this specific purpose.
So that's relationship maintenance and revenue generation.
Exactly. But the composition changes when you look at the broader traveling population.
How so?
Well, when looking at the largest number of travelers, so executives and occasional travelers, conferences and exhibitions are the top reason, cited by 30 to 35% of those groups. These are about networking, industry intelligence, and large-scale marketing opportunities that are just really difficult to replicate online. So while the return to office is driving some internal travel growth, the necessity of live industry events and client interaction is a much stronger and more durable driver.
So the travel that generates revenue, solidifies external relationships, and boosts internal culture is absolutely making a comeback. But the travel that was mostly informational, like content-forward seminars or routine internal check-ins, that's where virtual technology has successfully and permanently replaced the need to fly. We've become more judicious about why we fly.
Okay, so we've established that corporate mobility is a strategic investment, but any investment requires a strong management framework. And that brings us to policy. A travel policy used to be just a rigid checklist of what flight class you could book and what you could expense for dinner. Now it's this dynamic living document juggling compliance, wellness, risk management, and the human factor.
And this is where the system often breaks down, which leads us to the massive problem of unmanaged travel. Simply having a policy isn't enough if people don't find it practical or, user-friendly enough to follow. One survey found that 40% of business travelers admit to booking outside their company's official travel policy.
40%, that's nearly half the population.
It's a huge number. And the reasons why they go rogue tell the real story. They're often booking outside policy to stay closer to their meeting venue, to ensure their personal safety or convenience, to be in the same hotel as their client or team, or, ironically, because they think they can save the company money by using an OTA.
So in many cases, they are actively breaking the rules to achieve better business outcomes or higher personal convenience. And that just indicates a fundamental failure of the policy itself to serve the traveler's needs. A policy that doesn't account for the reality of the road warrior is, well, it's a policy designed to be broken.
So let's redefine what a travel policy should achieve in this new environment. What is its core function now?
At its core, a travel policy is the comprehensive set of rules, outlines, and procedures covering the organization, undertaking, and follow-up of business travel, from pre-approval all the way through to the payment and debrief. But the goals have evolved dramatically. They extend far beyond just initial cost management. They must also include robust risk management, promoting operational efficiency, and critically, addressing the human factor making the policy traveler-centric.
Let's hone in on that policy versus human factor conflict. If a policy is too rigid, too controlling, it causes massive friction and inevitably decreases morale and adherence. A truly modern strategic policy needs to consider the individual traveler, allowing for necessary preferences and a degree of independence.
This brings us directly to the exponential rise of bleisure, the blend of business and leisure travel. And this isn't a niche trend, it's mainstream. Two-thirds of corporate travelers extended a business trip for leisure in 2023, and notably, 1 in 7 did so 3 or more times that year. This trend represents a massive and rapidly growing market, valued at $315.3 billion in 2022 and projected to reach an impressive $731.4 billion by 2032. Employees see this flexibility as a valued benefit, a critical component of their overall work-life balance.
That level of growth means we can't afford to ignore it, but unmanaged leisure sounds like a complete logistical and financial headache for the finance and HR teams. What are the specific hidden costs when this employee benefit is completely unstructured?
The hidden costs are threefold and significant. First, you have financial fragmentation. Unmanaged leisure leads to booking through external personal channels, which means the company misses out on negotiated corporate savings and volume discounts. Second, data siloization. Fragmented bookings result in siloed data, which completely hampers strategic decision-making and forecasting, making it impossible to truly calculate the ROI we just talked about.
And what's the third and perhaps most damaging cost?
The third is the traveler morale issue. Unmanaged personal extensions mean employees pay for the personal days out of pocket and then often face long, frustrating waits for the reimbursement of the business portion of the trip. We know from our sources that expense claims can take a week or more to be reimbursed. That delayed cash flow is a major financial strain for the employee, which negatively impacts morale and increases internal friction.
That delayed reimbursement issue is critical. We see this reflected in organizational preferences, with 60% of organizations now favoring central payment solutions like corporate cards to eliminate or drastically shorten that wait time. It's an efficiency issue, but it's also a relationship issue with the employee.
Absolutely. So to mitigate these costs and risks, a policy must implement structured leisure guidelines. A clear framework has to define exactly how many personal days can be added, which expenses are covered by the company versus paid by the employee, and the required documentation for clear expense separation. And crucially, the policy should ensure the employee can access the company's preferred corporate rates for their personal extensions. That safeguards compliance and maintains the company's duty of care obligation throughout the trip.
That brings us perfectly to the legal and moral core of modern travel management. Duty of care in the new era, or what we now call people risk management. This has moved from an HR concept to a central legal mandate.
It has. Duty of care is the fundamental legal and moral obligation that an employer has to protect their employees from foreseeable harm while on company business. This isn't optional. It is legally mandated in over 50 countries globally. And it's important to distinguish between the two related terms. Duty of care is the why, the overarching legal and moral obligation. Travel risk management is the how, the practical processes you implement to fulfill that obligation, often aligned with international standards like ISO 31030.20E21.
So ISO 31030 is essentially the blueprint for executing the duty of care mandate. It ensures you have processes in place for preparedness, response, and review.
Exactly. But what's truly alarming is the gap between the traveler feeling safe and being covered and supported. 75% of travelers say they rarely or never feel unsafe during a trip, which is great, but a staggering 64% don't know if they are covered by the organization's travel security and medical support during bleisure extensions. And a shocking 39% receive absolutely no post-trip support or debriefing. That's a massive liability gap.
That gap highlights the need for a fundamental mindset shift toward comprehensive people risk management, which has to adapt to new workforce behaviors. So, how broad is this duty of care obligation today? Does it only apply to international trips?
It is surprisingly broad. The obligation applies to domestic trips just as much as international ones. For international travel, it requires consideration of specific local laws, health risks, and geopolitical security threats. And critically, your responsibility covers remote workers traveling for work-related purposes, say coming into headquarters for an offsite. And it absolutely covers the entire business portion of bleisure travel and the transition between business and leisure portions.
So what are the best practices for extending that care? It's much more complex than just providing a generic travel alert email, isn't it?
Much, much more. Best practices involve mandatory pre-travel approval to vet trips for inherent risk before the expense is incurred. It requires centralized booking through approved channels to ensure the company knows where the traveler is at all times. You need clear risk assessment guidelines for destinations, vetting partners for safety records, and providing comprehensive 24/7 support, not just for emergencies, but for logistical issues too.
And modern duty of care now explicitly includes mental health and wellness.
It absolutely does. Mental well-being on the road is crucial. Fatigue is cited as a significant drawback for 55% of travelers. So, supporting manageable schedules, perhaps enforcing buffer time after long-haul flights, and providing access to wellness resources is now critical to reducing friction and avoiding burnout. A fatigued traveler is a less productive, higher-risk traveler.
This is precisely where technology steps in to enforce compliance and close that liability gap. We established that 3 in 10 travelers never book through managed channels, driven by chasing better deals on online travel agencies or seeking easier change management directly via supplier sites.
Correct. And the rise of centralized booking tools and travel management companies, or TMCs, is essential here. For those unfamiliar, a TMC acts as your centralized booking and management platform. They consolidate all travel data and bookings into a single, unified system. They are poised to grow their share of bookings because they simultaneously help enforce duty of care, manage costs through aggregated data analytics, and accurately track environmental impact. Heightened duty of care during global crises has dramatically increased the pressure on organizations to use these in-program booking channels, making them indispensable strategic partners. They transform fragmented data into actionable intelligence.
Okay, here is where it gets compelling, because sustainability is the massive headwind affecting corporate policy, sitting right alongside the cost imperative. It's no longer just a nice-to-have or a voluntary badge of honor. It is fast becoming a mandatory corporate commitment driven by regulation.
It has moved firmly into the corporate mainstream, and the mandates are real. 79% of companies are actively working toward a pledge or commitment to reduce emissions. And consider the scale. Businesses account for roughly 30% of all air travel in Europe. So corporate mobility is a top target for reducing organizational environmental harm.
And that commitment is translating directly into purchasing decisions and policy changes. I think the number was 76% of travel buyers have already incorporated or plan to incorporate sustainability objectives into their corporate travel policies. And about half of surveyed executives say optimizing business travel policy to decrease environmental impact is a critical plan for the next year.
This is where we see the regulatory hammer dropping. The commitment is increasingly driven by mandatory reporting requirements, especially coming out of the EU, like the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD. This forces large organizations to report on their environmental performance, including Scope 3 emissions, which encompass business travel. When you have to legally report your carbon footprint, sustainability immediately becomes a financial mandate for the CFO, not just a PR exercise.
That makes the policy shift inevitable. It means companies are now allowing for more sustainable, even if sometimes higher cost options.
Exactly. A fantastic example is Siemens, which updated its travel guidelines to explicitly prioritize train travel over flights for short-haul journeys, even when the train ticket is demonstrably more expensive than a budget flight. They're essentially baking sustainability into their operational competitiveness and showing that the lowest financial cost does not necessarily equal the lowest strategic cost.
So let's look at the mechanics. If a company is moving toward mandated sustainability, how do they actually implement this in their policy? The sources outline 6 must-have elements for a truly sustainable travel policy. Let's tackle them one by one because this is where the real work happens.
Starting with flights, the first element is prioritizing direct flights. This is often counterintuitive for travelers seeking the cheapest route. However, every takeoff and landing accounts for a large, disproportionate share of an aircraft's emissions, especially during the climb and descent phases. Reducing stopovers significantly cuts the trip's overall carbon footprint, while also saving employees time and reducing fatigue, which aligns with traveler well-being goals.
Okay, so direct flights first. Second, we look at the defined class of travel. This is where the budget and environmental concerns often collide most dramatically.
They absolutely clash. Business class travel is a massive contributor to emissions, producing up to 3 times the CO2 of economy class on the same flight. The example data in the sources is truly stark. A one-way flight from London to New York in economy generates about 1.1 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions -TCO2e. That same journey in business class, it jumps dramatically to 3.24 TCO2e.
3.24 TCO2e for a single trip. That's equivalent to driving an average passenger car for nearly 10,000 miles. That's the real impact a CFO has to justify on the balance sheet and in that CSRD report.
Due to this staggering difference, we're seeing a clear trend. Many organizations are now mandating economy class for all flights under 6 hours. They're reserving premium cabins only for long-haul travel or for specific wellness-related needs like immediate client presentations upon arrival.
Third, organizations must robustly prioritize sustainable ground transport.
And that means favoring trains and electric vehicles, right? Correct. This means configuring booking tools to default to electric vehicles or to actively surface rail alternatives as the preferred option. The environmental difference is dramatic and easily measurable. That popular route from London to Paris by train produces roughly 22 kilograms of CO2, which is an absolute fraction of air travel. By automating the display of the sustainable choice, you nudge the traveler toward the greenest option.
The fourth point focuses on accommodation. Selecting certified hotels. How do companies ensure their hotel partners meet sustainability criteria?
They promote the use of hotels that adhere to verified global standards. We are talking about ratings like Neighbors in Australia or Green Key, which is a leading standard in the hospitality sector.
Companies must make these sustainability ratings visible during the booking process. This transparency not only guides the traveler, but also applies continuous pressure on the hotel industry to prioritize sustainability.
Fifth, companies must get analytical and assess airline sustainability profiles. This means looking beyond just the ticket price and evaluating the carrier itself.
Absolutely. Organizations need to look at factors like the airline's fleet age newer planes are far more efficient, their proactive use of sustainable aviation fuel, or SF, and their specific carbon reduction targets. S isn't just a marginal technology. It's estimated to contribute a massive 65% of the total emission reduction needed by aviation to reach net zero by 2050. The right travel technology should leverage an airline's SAF score to help travelers easily compare the total environmental impact of their choices.
And the sixth, and perhaps most impactful step, is the introduction of carbon budgets. This is where it becomes truly tangible and accountable, moving sustainability beyond compliance and into strategy.
This is the organizational game changer. It assigns a maximum emissions allowance to a specific business unit, a department, or even an individual traveler for a defined period. It transforms sustainability from an abstract environmental idea into a tangible, accountable, and measurable financial metric managed by the department head. It forces strategic trade-offs. If we take that long-haul, multi-person trip, we might not be able to take 3 shorter trips later in the quarter.
While these policy mechanics are absolutely essential, we have to talk about the challenge: overcoming traveler skepticism and ensuring policy adoption. It can't just be policy on paper. If the traveler sees the sustainable option as inconvenient or more expensive, they will just revert to that unmanaged booking behavior we discussed earlier.
That is the crucial adoption challenge. To succeed, companies need to move beyond just rules and employ comprehensive strategies. You need education on why the rules exist and what the regulatory consequences are. You need incentives to recognize and reward teams who consistently book within the sustainable policy. And you need full visibility by highlighting the choices and impacts directly in the booking tools. Regular, personalized carbon reporting helps travelers monitor their individual impact, making them active participants, not just policy subjects.
This engagement and incentivization leads us to a fascinating model for corporate adaptation, the Cope and Pay concept.
Yes, Cope and Pay is currently a tourism initiative in Copenhagen, but it presents a blueprint for corporate behavior change. It rewards tourists for sustainable actions, like using public transit instead of ride shares, with a digital currency redeemable for cultural experiences. If we adapt this to the corporate world, organizations could use gamification methods like internal leaderboards or the consumption of carbon budgets where employees earn points for eco-friendly travel choices.
And those points could be redeemed for meaningful perks, aligning the organizational ESG goal directly with individual employee behavior. Things like extra vacation days, premium charitable donations in their name, or maybe small luxury upgrades on the ground portion of their next trip.
Precisely. That model transforms policy adherence from a mandatory chore into a potentially rewarding activity, ensuring sustainability is not a constraint, but a deep, integrated element of the traveler's decision-making flow.
So we've covered the strategic imperative, the ROI, and the management framework, the policy. Now we shift gears completely to the technology that promises to tie this entire complex, multi-layered system together. Artificial intelligence. We're moving beyond the hype cycle surrounding large language models, and AI integration is becoming an operational and economic mandate. That is the critical distinction for travel managers. If 2024 was the year of experimentation and testing proofs of concept, 2025 and 2026 are slated to be the years of execution. Generative AI is moving beyond simple content creation and customer service chatbots to meaningful operational implementation. And critically, traveler use of GAI for trip planning doubled year over year, showing how quickly adoption is spreading. This means integrating AI is no longer just a technical choice. It is an economic necessity to keep pace with traveler expectations. The major operational obstacle AI needs to solve is what we call the inherent fragmentation problem in the travel industry. What exactly does that look like on the ground, and why is it such a burden?
The travel supply chain is incredibly fragmented. We have separate, siloed legacy systems for booking, pricing, payment, guest management, expense reporting. They often don't speak to one another effectively. This leads to massive friction for employees, duplicated work for administrative staff, delays, and crucially, missed revenue or savings opportunities because the data isn't centralized.
So a hotel might have automated check-in with a digital key, but the housekeeping and maintenance schedules are still managed manually on paper or in a separate, disconnected system.
Exactly. The goal isn't just to make one part of the system smarter. The goal is to connect intelligence with operations so that information flows freely across the entire ecosystem. This prevents staff from being overwhelmed by invisible, repetitive, and manual work that should have been automated.
So the future isn't simply about having a better chatbot that can answer questions. It's about creating a fundamentally smarter, interconnected system. This brings us to the rise of agentic AI. I really like the analogy. Not just a machine that can talk, but intelligent systems that can plan, reason, and act across a full workflow.
Agentic AI systems are a game changer because they are designed to perform complex tasks autonomously, unlike current generative AI, which usually only produces text or images based on a prompt. Agentic systems can plan out a multi-step solution, reason through constraints, and then act across multiple platforms, coordinating entire workflows in real time. They connect the intelligence of large language models, the brain, the strategic planner, with connected devices and robotics, the hands, the execution mechanism.
Give us a tangible operational example of that. How does agentic AI work when something goes wrong?
The impact on operations is profound, particularly during disruption. Imagine a single major flight delay. Currently, a human advisor has to manually intervene and coordinate everything. Rebooking the flight, calling the hotel to shift the check-in time, notifying ground transport to hold the car, and updating the expense system. With agentic AI, a delay in one part of the journey automatically triggers adjustments across all related downstream services. The flight change is accepted, the hotel reservation is shifted, the airport shuttle is rescheduled, and a client meeting time suggestion is sent via the traveler's Teams app.
That removes friction,
Yeah.
saves dozens of minutes of staff time, and significantly reduces the stress on the human advisor who previously had to manually coordinate all those moving parts during a crisis. The human staff moves from being the manual executor to the empathetic oversight.
Precisely. AI handles the repetitive, systematic work, allowing staff to focus on empathy, creativity, and the complex problem solving, the human parts of corporate mobility that can't be automated. Let's look at the 5 key AI applications coming in the 2025 roadmap for corporate travel management.
Okay, first, let's discuss personalization and efficiency. What kind of quantifiable gains are we seeing here?
Predictive booking tools and hyper-customized itineraries are quickly becoming the norm. The systems learn from a traveler's past behavior, their preferred seating, hotel chain loyalty, even their typical spending patterns. Early analysis shows potential efficiency gains of up to 25% on booking times alone, simply by instantly tailoring suggestions based on individual preferences and, critically, aligning those suggestions with live company policy.
And second, enhancing service and support. This is where the virtual assistant integrated into collaboration tools truly shines.
Yes, AI-powered virtual assistants, often given names like Scout or similar internal branding, are being seamlessly integrated directly into mobile apps and collaboration platforms like Microsoft Teams or Slack. They handle the vast majority of routine, simple queries, providing copies of invoices, retrieving forgotten itineraries, checking the status of a delayed expense report, or processing simple cancellations. This frees the highly valuable human travel advisors to prioritize complex itineraries, high-value negotiations, or immediate emergency travel assistance.
That's a perfect division of labor. AI handles the predictable noise, and humans handle the unpredictable crisis or complexity.
Absolutely. The third application is a major philosophical shift. AI moves from merely static policy enforcement to strategic policy optimization. That sounds like policies will start dynamically writing themselves based on real-time data.
That's an intriguing prospect. How does that work in practice?
The tools are evolving rapidly. Future AI-driven systems are expected to move beyond merely enforcing static rules, like no business class under 6 hours, to dynamically analyzing traveler behavior, market conditions, and even geopolitical instability. The system can then recommend live policy adjustments and savings opportunities without requiring constant manual oversight from finance or travel managers. For example, if the system detects that 80% of travelers are booking outside policy for a specific city due to a lack of convenient accommodation options, it can proactively recommend the policy be updated to include a new, slightly more expensive but better located vendor.
That changes the policy from a static rulebook into a dynamic learning organizational asset.
Exactly. The fourth application is critical for our previous discussion: duty of care and risk management. How does AI enhance safety beyond simply sending a general alert?
I understand agentic AI sounds fantastic on paper, but given the current fragmentation of systems, how realistic is it for a mid-sized company to fully implement this within the next 18 months without a complete painful overhaul of their existing TMC and expense infrastructure? It feels like a multi-year project, not a roadmap item.
That's a fundamentally important challenge, and you're right. For a mid-sized company, full implementation is a multi-year effort that requires strategic partnerships. The beauty of the roadmap is that the initial benefits, like the AI virtual assistant handling routine queries, can be deployed relatively quickly as add-ons to existing TMC mobile platforms. Full agentic capability, connecting the TMC to the HR system to the hotel's property management system, that requires standardization and API integration, which is what the industry is focusing on now. The key is to start small. Integrate AI for personalization and service support first, then move to policy optimization.
Understood. It's an evolution, not a revolution for most companies. Now, let's return to duty of care. How does AI enhance safety in a tangible way?
Future AI tools will provide enhanced safety by offering real-time risk assessments. It moves beyond simple travel advisories to predictive rerouting around potential instability, say, predicting a protest route based on social media analysis. It can offer live safety ratings for specific neighborhoods or transportation hubs. And crucially, it incorporates sentiment analysis, monitoring traveler check-ins, messages, or even expense anomalies to detect early signs of traveler distress for timely human intervention. The system can proactively sense trouble before the traveler even asks for help.
That transforms risk management from reactive tracking into proactive prevention.
And finally, the fifth application is sustainability. We just covered how critical ESG goals are, so AI must be deeply integrated here to handle the complexity.
How does AI help with those 6 policy elements we just discussed, like carbon budgeting?
AI is essential for making carbon budgets functional. It will constantly forecast the carbon impacts of various travel choices, automatically suggest the lowest impact route, recommend carbon offsets based on vetted suppliers, and most importantly, deeply integrate sustainability options and carbon usage data into booking suggestions at every single stage of travel planning. This means carbon budgeting and tracking becomes automated, verifiable, and seamlessly integrated into the decision-making process, helping clients meet those stringent ESG goals with minimal manual overhead. The technology brings the policy mandates to life. So, if we synthesize this new era of corporate mobility, the story is fundamentally about maximizing strategic value while aggressively minimizing negative impact, whether that impact is financial, environmental, or related to human well being. The industry is grappling with high supplier prices and tough negotiations, yet simultaneously balancing traveler demands for flexibility and comfort with mandatory sustainability goals. All of this relies on human expertise, but that expertise is now fundamentally enhanced and streamlined by intelligent, increasingly agentic AI systems.
The core takeaway here is that the shift we've identified from cost center to strategic investment is permanent. Corporate mobility is now recognized as essential to cultural cohesion, talent retention, and market growth. We are seeing companies literally reallocating resources from unused physical office space as remote work stabilizes, directly into travel budgets to strengthen culture, facilitate collaboration, and improve retention.
And organizations that successfully use technology to integrate these three pillars, strategic purpose validated by ROI, flexible human-centric policy, and AI-powered enforcement, are the ones best positioned for sustained growth in this new global landscape. The best policies aren't about saying no, they are about enabling purpose and minimizing risk.
So what does this all mean for you? It means corporate mobility is officially a quantifiable strategic investment. If you're a leader overseeing travel, procurement, or finance, you need to be actively looking at the return on investment, not just the cost savings, for every trip taken. Organizations that optimize their travel based on data and purpose are actively gaining a competitive advantage over their more risk-averse or short-sighted peers. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought for you to mull over. We know from historical analysis that organizations that maintained higher levels of strategic business travel during previous economic downturns recovered faster and consistently outperformed their peers afterward. Given the data suggests U.S. firms are still significantly underinvesting in travel compared to the point that would yield optimal profitability, with a gap that has grown to 8.3%, how can leaders truly quantify the long-term, perhaps irreversible cost of not putting their people on a plane for that crucial face-to-face meeting that could define a new client relationship or internal cultural direction? Something to think about as you draft your next T&E budget and plan your 2026 strategy.